Portugal, and also probably thinking about what you need to plan for. Now, the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce here in the UK is really here to help. We're an independent, non-commercial organisation where we work with our members who are companies from Portugal mostly. And what we've done is we've set up the Moving to Portugal events in the UK and Ireland. So just so you know, my name's Christina Hipsley. You probably know that by now. I'm the General Manager of the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in the UK. Now, I've been the General Manager since 2009. It seems a long time, but it's gone incredibly fast. I started my career in advertising and media relations. I worked in London, then I went to live in Lisbon early in my career, and I spent 10 years working and living in Portugal, building up advertising and publishing businesses. I then decided to sell up and come back to England for personal reasons, but Portugal was actually very hard to stay away from. I think all of you know that feeling. And once I came back to the UK, I got drawn back again into the work of the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce here in the UK, which was doing some great things, promoting business and trade between the two countries. And I also bought a house in Portugal, even though I wasn't living there, but I was spending an awful lot of time there for work, and also it was my second home. But during my time in Portugal, I lived and worked in a variety of places. So I lived in and worked, as Alexandra knows, because I've told her my history. I lived and worked in Lisbon, Cascais, the Silver Coast, which is the area north of Lisbon. I also lived in, which most people don't know this, I lived for a couple of years in the farming area in Extremadura, in Vila Franca de Xira. I also worked a lot in Porto and the Algarve. And it's really been wonderful watching how Portugal's developed over the last few years. And it's still my own from home even now. So the Chamber started these Moving to Portugal events in a small way about 3 years ago in order to spread the word about Portugal's very attractive tax regime, and also to introduce visitors and people who wanted to move to Portugal to our Chamber members in Portugal who could help them with their move. Now, since the Brexit vote in the UK in 2016, interest in Portugal has just grown and grown, and over 6,000 people have now attended our events, of which 3,000 have continued to stay involved and want us to keep sending them information. Now, in usual times, remember those, before March, our Moving to Portugal events take the form of a one-day exhibition and information seminars that run during the day alongside the exhibition. And we run about 3 or 4 a year of those normally in London or in other cities. Now, our last live event was due to be held on the 17th of March. Now, we all know what happened in the UK in March. So obvious reasons we had to postpone it. We have tentatively rescheduled the live event for the 20th of October 2020. And we are waiting to hear more from the government about whether the government guidelines will allow events of this kind to take place in October. It's still several months away, well, 3.5 months away. We're hopeful, but we're not sure yet. So in order to keep answering all your questions, we have lots and lots of questions and thousands of people interested in Portugal. We have added webinars, which you're now listening to. And these webinars allow us to get much more specific about the information and answer your questions, actually, probably more than we can at the big one-day events. And it also means our chamber members can tell you more about life in Portugal and how they can help you and solve your problems. The Chamber of Commerce, as you can imagine, we do events both in Portugal and the UK, but most of our events are here in the UK. We do a lot of real estate and moving to Portugal events because there's such a demand for it, but we also obviously do other events about investment in Portugal, and we do conferences about other subjects, green energy and things like that. But for today's purposes, obviously, we're interested in the practicalities of moving to Portugal. So, title of the webinar, How to Relocate to Portugal the Easy Way. Today, I thought we'd introduce you to our chamber members, Kleya. Now, Kleya, of which you see the CEO here, Alexandra, Kleya offer one-stop solutions, whether you're looking to retire, live, work, study, or invest in Portugal. And I want you to meet Kleya's CEO, Alexandra Cesario, who is now going to, during the course of the next 20 minutes or so, she's going to explain why Portugal offers such attractive financial incentives, how they work, and what might or might not happen after Brexit. And she's also going to talk to us about some real life case studies, which I always think are the most interesting things, because how people actually do it is actually the most important thing. If you've got a specific question, please put it in the chat function, and which you can see here on screen, and we'll answer the questions in about 10 minutes time. And a little bit about Alexandra. She's the founding partner and administrator at Kleya, and she's been working for over 20 years in client services. As you're going to hear in a minute, she's also extremely fluent in many languages, English, German, Spanish, French, and Italian, because she's lived abroad for over 13 years. But for today, we're going to speak English, I think, Alexandra, if you wouldn't mind, because my German, Spanish, French, and Italian is a bit rusty. So
I can oblige.
Obviously, that means you can work with English clients, German clients, Spanish clients, French clients, Italian clients, Portuguese clients. Alexandra, tell us very briefly, so that we're sticking to time. I'm running the stopwatch here. Tell us very briefly about Kleya, and then we'll get into some of the detail.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra, as Christina said, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, the Chamber and Christina, for the invitation. As Christina was saying, I founded this company, actually not alone, with my business partner Vasco, who you can see now in this picture. This is us. And when we set up the company, basically we are true believers that Portugal is one of the best places, I was going to say, on earth to live. Granted that I'm Portuguese, but if you know Portuguese, you also know that Portuguese are not necessarily the best defenders or protectors of their own country and of their own brands. So first and foremost, what we try is to convey what Portugal is and what Portugal has to offer. Why did we believe that Kleya made sense? A lot of times when we want to move to another country or consider for certain circumstances in our lives, we don't really know how to go about it. And even though the country might have the right conditions for us, if the process is complicated and cumbersome, or if you encounter problems, sometimes it just leaves you, or basically it makes it a whole lot more difficult for you to enjoy even the beginning of your life in the new country. So what we did is basically set up a one-stop shop in which you can count on us to support in making the decision, in planning, in organizing, in actually executing, and then supporting you after you move, in this case, to Portugal.
Okay.
So what's the thing about Portugal? I know that most of the time you see what you have here on screen.
Yeah.
I never get tired of saying this, but also, as I say, because I really, really am a true believer. Yes, we have a lot of sun. Yes, we have a lot of a very good gastronomy. People, the Portuguese people is very nice and welcoming. And obviously there are other elements that are usually very important to foreigners who consider moving to another country. And that is mainly safety, even the infrastructures. And obviously, when we say quality of life, it can mean different things to a lot of people. But I think in general, we can all agree that there's a very high level of quality in Portugal. Even though before I said that prior COVID, I do believe that now people might be looking even more for this type of living conditions. So I think it even heightened with the whole situation that unfortunately we're still living.
Clean air, clean, safe, etc. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So tell us about the tax regime, which is particularly interesting.
You see, sometimes it's a very good combination. Sometimes I'm not even very prone to speaking about the fiscal benefits because I say, listen, Portugal is really, it should stand up on its own. But the fact is that if you can have both, why not?
Yeah.
So ever since 2013, approximately, Portugal has a special regime for non-habitual residents that basically gives some tax benefits to foreigners who haven't been fiscally resident in Portugal for the past 5 years. Now, this is the main criteria. And then obviously one needs to analyze each case to determine whether a foreign person is eligible or not. But the main point is that there are certain tax exemptions on foreign income, such as interests, dividends, rental income, and up until last year, pensions, which now are taxed at 10%. Now, all the changes that occur, they are not retroactive, so they do not apply to people who have applied before to the NHR regime. So even if changes then occur in the future, after you have applied, it does not affect you. Obviously, the regime that is valid is the one that is in place when you apply.
Okay. So we can see here the top headlines of this non-habitual regime. Yes.
Usually, this is very interesting for mainly two types of, I would say, segments. You'll understand why I say segments. So people who are retired and therefore wish to enjoy their maybe active retirement days, because no one usually stops working nowadays with different conditions, and then workers, people who maybe are relocated to a different country. And then there's a cap on taxes that they pay, which is basically 20% on the professional income. And that is quite enticing. In this case, obviously, there are a lot more things that come into play, such as the value that they place on family. And that's something also that we take very close attention to.
Yeah.
And we'll come to the segments later in which I'll explain how we have identified our services.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, just a very important thing. It's valid for 10 years. It's a tax year. It's a 10-year tax-free window. Okay.
And now, we should say, just before you tell us about the transitional period, the British are the single biggest group of foreign nationals living in Portugal right now, are they not? There are approximately 500,000 non-Portuguese officially registered as resident in Portugal right now, but obviously around 200,000 of those are Brazilians, Cape Verdeans, or other Portuguese-speaking nationals who've come from other countries. But there's over 35,000 British currently registered to live in Portugal officially, and that's not counting the many thousands of British that have a house in Portugal and come and go every year. So as you say, this is a hugely attractive tax regime for the British right now, and quite rightly, Alexandra, you're now going to tell us the $64,000 question: what happens during the transition period, which we're living through now, which will end at the end of this year?
Yeah, exactly. So in regards to the British living here, it's, in a sense, you could say that they were visionaries. Even prior to fiscal benefits that existed, they already came here. So we have a very long tradition. And it's also not difficult at all to, obviously, I always recommend that one speaks Portuguese, at least understands the culture of the country. But the truth is that it's not difficult being here and living here, even though you might not master completely the Portuguese language. Obviously, with public services, it's different, but we'll come to that in a little bit. So regarding famous Brexit, as you know, Britain, well, is undergoing Brexit, or you could say that Brexit already occurred, and we're currently during what is called the transitional period. So since February up until the end of the year, there's a withdrawal agreement in place that basically allows British passport holders to register in a UE country during this period. And I'm sure that, and it's actually one of the questions by Elena that I saw on the chat earlier. what do we need, what do you need in order to actually become a resident in Portugal. You will need a lease contract, a rental contract, and we'll come to that. We do, as Christina said, have a special offer for all of you that is adapted exactly to what you may need if you want to take a step forward in taking advantage of the fact that you can still do it, since it's unknown what's going to happen after the 31st of December. Currently, what is happening in Portugal is that any British passport holder can register in Portugal. You don't need to have been living here prior to the transitional period. This is very important. And you can register meeting certain conditions. It's actually not very complicated. And this residency permit is valid for a period of 5 years. And you don't have to move to Portugal. It's basically a sort of, well, basically it entitles you to move to Portugal. You still have then European Union rights, citizen rights, but you don't really have to move. Another thing is that should only part of the family currently be able to move to Portugal, in this case, there's always something that is called family reunification, in which the other members, just imagine that part of the family moves and then the rest stays in the UK or some other country, they could basically join afterwards.
Okay.
So,
one question we have on the chat, actually, Alexandra, it's quite a good moment to ask it. We've got a question from Mike Brooks. Is the 10% tax on pensions on the full pension amount, or are there any personal tax allowances, as in the UK? So here in the UK, the first 12,500 of any income you get is tax-free, and then the income tax starts after that. Do you know, you're not a tax expert, Alexandra, so I know, don't worry if we need to go get the answer and tell Mike later, but do you by any chance know if the pension charges, the tax on the pension starts from zero, or does it start from after a 10,000 euro allowance or something like that, tax-free allowance?
No, it starts, the value, it starts from zero. If I got the question right, it starts from zero. No, this is applicable to private pensions and not state pensions.
No,
okay?
not state pensions.
But Mike, we'll be delighted to give you a more thorough answer if you can provide us with more information. Any questions that go unanswered, please understand that we might not be able to answer all of them, also because sometimes there are other specialists involved. So any questions that might go unanswered, don't worry, because we can schedule a call after from this webinar onwards, and we'll be delighted to provide you some very specific answers.
Yes,
okay?
because Frank, can I also just say to all our viewers, there's no one Alexandra doesn't know. Between Alexandra and Bashku, her partner, her business partner, and all their connections and contacts, I can assure you, Alexandra would know where to get any answer you could possibly want. Forgive me, Alexandra, I interrupted you. Do carry
Christine,
on.
if you just don't mind, even though the first picture that you saw was only Vasco and myself, not only do we have a very good team in place, and you'll see the picture later on, just so that you put some, just so you can see who we are, the whole team. And additionally, obviously, we made it our business to have the right partners in place. So the more important thing is that we are not legal specialists, we are not fiscal specialists, we are support specialists, okay? And our business is to basically get the right answers with the partners with the right network. So just implementing what Christina was saying.
Tell us a little bit more. I'm conscious we've got approximately 5 minutes left, although we can continue a little bit later to run over a little bit. We've still got lots of loyal viewers watching, so if you can bear with us, we'll keep going. Alexandra, carry on and explain very briefly, what your next points are.
Yeah, before we go into what exactly Kleya can do, I just wanted to point out that I understand that sometimes people, well, first of all, we can either do the whole service from the beginning to the end. If someone has a specific problem, we can also do single services, or we can do fully customized proposals, okay? Now, one of the questions sometimes is, so what's the difference between doing it on my own and doing it with Kleya? We are very big supporters of planning and of organization. And the situation is that sometimes you really need to know how a country works and be able to navigate through the waters of a certain culture and certain bureaucratic processes in order to make things happen faster and even that they are done right. Even with Portuguese, it can happen then things don't go well because sometimes you don't even know how to deal with the system. So it's not only because of the culture or the language. And plus, instead of having to go about and asking questions in lots of different places, trying to get then what's right and different sources, basically we can be a single point of contact. And obviously we overcome the language barrier. I think that's fairly obvious. But most of all, we work on your side. So it's independent advice, always like we were your right arm. So basically, we are we are the client. So we always try to think things from your perspective.
Okay, that sounds. So just to clarify, if somebody's got a very specific issue, as we're seeing here, a new beginning in Portugal, but daunted by the detail, Kleya can make it happen. I understand that. So you can either talk to somebody who's got a very complicated lifestyle issue or has a big relocation problem or is simply wanting advice on every stage, and you can tailor make a plan for that and just deal with them and deal with whatever they may want to do.
Yes.
Could you give us an example of that? I think you talked recently about working with a client who wanted to buy or build a house and wanted to find the land. So this was somebody that you just helped exactly with their particular set of circumstances. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Actually, it was an interesting case because they were Scottish, they were living in Australia and they wanted to move to Portugal. And one of the situations in the beginning was, we have a cat and we are still trying to see how we can bring our pet over. And obviously when people
they had a pet.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they had, right. I know, because we had a big question from Fiona.
I know Fiona about the pet.
Fiona, about pets.
I haven't forgotten.
But it's very specific, Fiona's question. But
I know.
Yeah, cats and dogs is a more general one, yeah. Carry on. You say you're Scottish couple with a cat.
Yes. Now, and in general, the situation is that you have to have the veterinary, all the shots must be in place, veterinary certification, and quarantine might be mandatory. Obviously, now we are during COVID, so certain things might have changed. And Fiona, I will not be able to give you an exact answer right now, but I will get back to you on that. Okay? So please, it will
We're
not
going to know about parrots by the end of this. Yeah. Okay. So tell us about the Scottish couple briefly.
Yes, they basically wanted to be in the countryside. And one of the things that you're very careful about is that depending on the country and the culture, sometimes the expectations when you say, I want to be in the countryside, I want to have a certain type of quiet living, but then we really do need to understand what is important. If it's because you like to hike, but you still want to be 1 hour and a half away from the airport. So the objectives, it's not only saying, I want to move to Portugal and talk about money. No. It's defining exactly what are the purposes so that then the expectations, we're very careful about expectations, so that the expectations meet reality. And that's one of the aspects that for us is very important. In this case, going back to the Scottish couple, what happened is that they basically wanted a plot or a house that, I mean, it was already finished. They were open to both aspects. And basically we ended up finding, so in this case, it was a property finding, it was a tailored service. You'll be seeing on screen that these are the tailored services that we have. And in this case, this was property and relocation, well, a little bit of everything with residency planning. Mm-hmm. And what we did is that we ended up doing the search on their behalf and then putting together the agenda, accompanying them, visiting the houses, and then selecting, negotiating, and making everything happen. There were still some improvements that needed to be done, so we also coordinated that. We have our own architects in the team.
Okay.
So this was in a way an end-to-end, and then certain formalities that are always needed, such as, okay, utilities contracts, they're all in Portuguese, they are 20 pages long. Mm. It's not something that you really want to be dealing with. Mm. And that's So basically, we make it easier in that sense. What you're now seeing on screen is basically the list of the most common services that we have, and that can all be tailored. What we've also done is that because of the objectives that we mentioned, I mentioned segments earlier. So what we did is that we put together certain groups of services to make it easier for people to understand, and that's what you're seeing now on screen, making it easier for you to understand. So exactly how can Kleya help me? We can also do everything tailor-made. That's not a problem at all. But in order for you to have an idea, what we did is that we defined, okay, someone who wants to retire to Portugal, what are the main needs that they have? Work, same thing. Then residency by investment, which is the golden visa, the so-called golden visa. Second home, sometimes people don't really want to move, but just to have a second home and visit. And then because we also need to pay attention to the younger people in our society, students, which obviously also need support. So what did we do? We put together first, for example, the retire plan. This is just to give you an example, and yes, you already see some prices so that you don't have an idea that so that you can basically have an idea of what the values are about. So here, for example, what are the common threads of most people who want to retire to Portugal? You'll need a tax ID, most probably thinking about the NHR regime. You want to know whether you're eligible or not. You will need to find a place to live. And here what we do again is independent advice. We're not a real estate agency. Basically, we have connections with most, if not, well, a lot of agencies in the market. And what we do is that we basically search on your behalf from an independent perspective. Then the formalities of the registration so that you can actually be here. This is also tied to residency, as you'll see. Even though we always recommend they also have private insurance, it's always good that you're registered in the local national health system. And obviously then what I mentioned earlier, which is something, well, utilities, which you will need for the NHR as well. And you will also need to leave because it's always good to have electricity and water. So these are the basics. Additionally, should you also want support with the moving management, you can also do that. Basically what we do is that we get different quotes. First we define exactly what you want to move. Then we define so the valuables or the fragile elements. Then we put it together, we ask for quotes so that you can analyze, and then we coordinate the move. And we can even be there when it arrives, should you not be able to be here. NHR registration, we don't put it as mandatory because obviously then it's up to you to decide whether you want it or not. Another example is worker, and we've had a lot of cases of families wanting to move to Portugal. So basically one of the family members has a contract and they're relocated, the whole family moves. And one of the main points here is the attention that needs to be put into the family, because for these people, it's the whole family. Obviously, the fact that, for example, first, sometimes it's more important for them that the kids are accepted in the school that they want, and then they start all the other, they make all the other decisions. But this is one of the main points that usually are quite crucial. Now, the other plans that we have, they make sense. So second home, should you not want to leave and just be here occasionally. Residency by investment, should it be needed for you, currently you don't need it because you still have the option of
British people don't need it, yeah.
Exactly, and just so that you know, chances are that after the 31st of December, that it will not go down the route of the golden visa. Chances are it will be more of a hybrid status. Obviously, no one can guarantee. So if this is a concern, you should act before and with some time.
To act before the end of this year. But Alexandra and I, we both realise the Portuguese government is extremely alert to the fact that the British are huge investors in Portugal, and many thousands of British are living in Portugal already, and many thousands more want to go and live in Portugal. So it is very likely, as you say, the Portuguese government is considering some kind of easy transition to make it very easy for British people to keep buying houses and settling in Portugal even after the 31st of December this year. We just don't know what form that will take yet. But yeah.
However, if residency in Europe is something that you want to hold on to, or if you're thinking about applying to the NHR at some point, I mean, I would obviously recommend that you take action before the 31st of December.
Okay.
To be on the safe side.
To be on the safe side. Okay.
It's better to count with something that you know rather than with something that you don't know. Student, as I said, so it's I think parents always want to know that if their children come and spend a year or 6 months in a country, that they can actually also have some support. And obviously then we are always here for advice and ongoing type of support. Okay. Now, what did we do? And this is coming back to what Christina was saying earlier. Currently, what you would need, if you wanted to take a step further, would be make sure that you get a residency permit. And for that, what you'll need to have, and in case you still don't have it, because there can be hybrid situations here, is a tax number of non-resident that you will always need. And then you'll need proof of residency. And for that, you will need a rental contract. Now, because sometimes this is a temporary situation and you might not be able, as is the current right now, travel to Portugal to actually see where you want to live. Sometimes what we do is that we find temporary accommodations that legally in the contract also meets all the requirements for a residency, and even if needed for early NHR, if you wanted to already apply for NHR. And then it gives you time for you to either rent a different property at some point or acquire a property, but it gives you time to think. So it gives you options. So basically this is us working on the planning and on the supporting you with your objectives. So what you see here are the main 6 services that at this point would be necessary. And you can see that the fee indicated is for one person and for a couple. And because we actually launched a platform to give further support to all our clients living all across Portugal, what we also did is that if you join, you'll be receiving a code later on. And if you join our Kleya membership service, in which you can actually also clarify some certain legal advice, you have access to services, you can directly contract services remotely, which is quite interesting. And then we also have promotions from partners of ours. But in this case, most importantly, you will get 10% off our services. So.
Okay, so we'll put details of that in the email. Now, I'm conscious we've overrun by 6 or 7 minutes. But luckily, we still have many of our viewers are patiently waiting with us. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, Alexandra, which have appeared on the chat. Sadly, Fiona, we, as you heard, Alexandra knows about cats and dogs, but parrots are a very specific thing. So we're going to find out about parrots and get back to you.
Yes, Fiona, don't worry. We'll get back to you on that.
We will get back to you. We've got a vet on the case. And we've got a question from Joaquin. Importing a car to Portugal is usually subject to import tax. But Joaquin is asking, he may have read that this might change for cars registered before 2007. The importation of cars from the UK down to Portugal is an issue that we get quite a lot of questions about. We're no experts on this. Can you give us a very quick overview about cars, or is this the importation of cars, or is this too specialist a subject? And what's normally the easiest thing?
Well, speaking about that, when you subscribe to Kleya membership, you also have exclusive content. Right. Some of the articles that you write are about this type of subject, and one of them is actually about car import. One of the main elements is to have all the documentation and the documentation that the EU requires. Okay, and in order to be eligible for exemption on the taxes that you'd have to pay to import a car, one of the elements is to have what they call the certificate of conformity. That's like the most important element to have in order to actually be eligible. Now, regarding specific situations, again, we'll be glad to address that. Please leave all your contacts, all of those who are currently leaving messages in the chat box. Please leave your contacts, your email at least, if not your phone, so that we can actually reach you a lot easier.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. We've got one last question. Mike Brooks is asking, we plan to retire to Portugal in 2 years' time. What is the best way to get residency before the end of the transition period? You mentioned that you can get help with a rental agreement without moving to Portugal to get the NHR. How does that work? So that's actually what you were just explaining. Perhaps you could reply again to Mike's question. So he wants to retire to Portugal in 2 years, but how can he get residency before the end of the year without going to live there, if you see what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
In a way, to put it simply, you need an address. But obviously, as you can tell, I mean, getting an address, you could imagine you have a friend and you say, oh, let me use your address. That can cause problems further ahead. So what we have is what we call like a sort of a temporary solution, in which we look for a rental contract that if you're not living here, we can search for solutions that have lower values than you would otherwise find in cities. And we can basically support you until you decide to come. So it's a full normal contract with full living conditions. And the only thing is that we would look further out just so that it's more convenient for you, so that you wouldn't pay such a higher rent value. Mind that the values that we're showing before, obviously they do not include the rental values, okay? That will depend on the search that we do. And that is actually the one that we are in a way suggesting for the residency solution before the 31st, because it's temporary. So it's not a place where you will necessarily live. Obviously it has living conditions, you can go there, but it's mainly so that you have a sound address in Portugal, and that we do it the right way, so that, for example, Mike, in 2 years' time, if then you're retired and you have a pension, we want to become an HR, or even if you have other sources of income, then we can follow that procedure, but there's nothing now that would put that into risk. If something is done wrongly from the onset, then it can have consequences afterwards, and that's something that we wouldn't want.
Which is why you need the inside track. Now, just before we finish, because I'm conscious we have overrun by 10 minutes, but that's a very good sign. We're going to answer one last question, and I think we'll take the one from David Whittle. David, so you're asking, this is about the golden visa. Okay, Alexandra, with the golden visa, if David gets citizenship in year 6, what are his options for tax in the UK and Portugal, and passports, UK or Portugal, and his right to travel?
It's actually an excellent question. So citizenship and fiscal are two quite different things, okay? So the golden visa, and I'm not sure if you're a passport, UK passport holder. I'm sorry, I do this because I'm looking at the chat. The situation is as follows. The golden visa is for non-Schengen nationals, okay? And usually what it gives you is the right then to access Schengen, to travel and to live here if you want to, but it's not mandatory. In fact, you only have a 1-2 week period that you need to be in the country for a period of 1 year. Now, at year 6, then you are entitled to citizenship. Whether you are fiscally resident here or not will depend on how often you come and how you planned your life. In the sense that in Portugal, if you spend over 183 days in Portugal, you're liable to be considered fiscal resident, okay? This is why I go back to the planning. It's better that you see, according to your fiscal situation, when you'd like to become NHR. And from this, then we have to say, okay, what do you need to be careful about? Because you can just get the golden visa, although again, if you're a British passport holder, currently you don't, and chances are that from 31st of December onwards, we don't believe that it's gonna go down that route, but nonetheless, would recommend to take action before. But in any event, with the golden visa, then you're entitled to move to Portugal if you want and travel freely across the European Union. Now, you can, after you get what's so-called, you're granted the golden visa, then you can apply for the NHR, okay? Only afterwards, if you are a non-Schengen national, okay? So it's two different elements. One is residency and the other one is fiscal. Okay. Yeah. So I'll be glad to, this was David, right? Thank you for leaving your email as well. We'll get back to you on that. It's probably easier if you have a one-to-one and to be able to address.
Right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I think on the basis we said we'd spend 30 minutes and we've already done 45, I think we better draw this to a close. I'm delighted to say that 90% of our visitors are still with us. So thank you to all our participants for being present with us. We would like to encourage you to come to our next webinars. Our next one is next Tuesday, but full details will be sent around shortly. And it only remains for me to thank Alexandra. Thank you so much to you and your team. I should add that, yes, there's 10 or 12 of you in the office. It all looks remarkably calm over there, but behind the scenes, there's 12 members of the Kleya staff all rushing around a large office in Lisbon, dealing with all these questions. So thank you to Alexandra and the team. And I'd like to thank all our participants, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and my team here. And we'll be in touch. We'll send you everything. All our participants will get this information by email. And if you've got any questions, do get in touch. info@portuguese-chamber.org.uk. Thank you.
Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Christina, and the Chamber, obviously, for the invitation. And our details will be shared. So feel free to contact us for more specific, if you didn't, leave us a message in the chat box, okay?
Beijinhos a toda a gente. Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bom dia.
Bom dia.